Hey there! In today's video, we are talking about how do you hire a grant writer? How do you find them? Where is someone that you trust? What are the questions you should ask? What scope of work should you start with? Can you pay the grant writer from the grant? All of that, right? We're going to cover those questions and more. So with no further ado, let's hit it. All right, let's start with the top. How do you find a grant writer you can trust? If you Google hire a grant writer, I actually just did it before this, I started to talk, hiring a grant writer. You will get so many ads from Upwork, Freelancer, Fiverr, what's the other one? I don't know, Collabtree. Anyway, bunch of ads. Yes, there are good grant writers on those platforms, but I also hear a lot of horror stories by people that do ultimately end up coming to us and asking for one of our certified grant writers. And I think the problem is grant writing can be, maybe if you are a writer, you might just say, well, okay, I can say I'll do grant writing, but it's really not your expertise, or you really haven't been trained in the methodology and process. So yes, that's an option available to you, but it's not the first thing I would recommend. What I'm stoked about is that is not our core focus, at least it hasn't been, right? Our focus has been training up people to be certified grant writers, showing them how to get out into the world to find people like you. But we did throw up one page on our website, learngrantwriting.org/hire-a-grant-writer, and it's actually ranked now #1 in Google. And so that's cool. We really haven't fully figured out a process yet for it only features like a handful of grant writers. We don't have everyone. We now have hundreds of grant writers in the program that are certified. So I would love your feedback on what, if you think we should be doubling down on that and actually helping facilitate that matchmaking process. Sort of what we're thinking right now for V1 would be, can you post a job that'll get emailed out to all of our certified grant writers, and then you would be able to get responses back. Similar to Upwork, where you would post a proposal, a job proposal, get a bunch of applicants, pick out your favorites, do some interviews, and select someone you want to work with. So would love your feedback on that. But what are your other options? Because I'm sure you're curious. So grantwriterteam.com is an option. They also have you pay to post your job description. This is making sure you're serious. Yes, you need to pay your grant writer. We'll talk about that in a second. And so that's fine. But when I've interviewed grant writers that have gone through that program that do have had work through that website, that are joining us in the collective for their continued professional development, it doesn't sound like it's a very great experience for them. I haven't done it before, so I guess I can't talk smack. But if you also go to the website, it's a pretty old school, archaic experience, which is a very common thing in the industry that we're trying to disrupt. So that is an option. You could certainly go give that a go. A website that I'm not seeing index in Google, but you could go check out as well, would be Open Grants. So they're really trying to democratize access to grant funding, and they have some great grant writers. We funnel a bunch of our people over to them once they've hit a certain threshold in experience. These tend to be your bigger, more complex proposals. They have some great people. So if you end up wanting to go check that out, that's an option as well. And what else is there? Kind of that's it. The rest of these are sort of blogs, right? A couple of other local tips would be, there's someone that's writing grants in your community or in your industry. So go find out who wrote that grant that was successful for you and start figuring it out, whether it's a contract-based grant writer or if it's in-house, whatever. You'll figure out a lot. When I went after a really big and competitive federal transportation grant, I wanted to know this guy that was successful writing an Alaska grant for this program. And so I did everything in my power to track down old Ron, and turns out he lived in San Francisco. And so I was able to get him on my team because I wanted that specialized expertise. You will do the same thing to figure out who is available in my community. So if you look up, press releases, who's getting grant funding, especially large amounts of it, go to those organizations and ask them, can I ask who your grant writer was? I'm looking for someone. So that's a good strategy as well. You might also try this, is going to sort of the regional community foundations and asking them, hey, what do you know about the independent contractor scene here? Do you know some names that you would recommend I could reach out to? So that would be another method as well. But honestly, if you think we should double down on this, I'm kind of warming to it, to be honest. So I would love your feedback on that. DM us on Instagram at Learn Grant Writing. Send me an email, info@sendworks.org, or just add a comment below this video because I would like your feedback. I think it could be really fun. Okay, so that brings us to our next question, which is, how should you work with a grant writer? The methodology that we strongly encourage, and this language is on our website so you can read about it, is start with a funding strategy. You need to know what grants you should pursue, and you should look under every single little stone, 150 plus grants, and get that down to the top pursuits worth your time. That's not a process I expect you to know how to do, but your grant writer will, at least certainly any of them that you get from the Grant Writing Global Grant Writer Collective, right? Our program. So that would be what I would recommend as a starting point, because then you know what grants you have the best chance of winning, the highest return on investment, right? So that can inform then, okay, what is my grant writer going to focus on for the next 12 to 18 months? Or even what you're going to handle, maybe half of it in-house, half of it with the contract grant writer, etc. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. But I really always recommend starting with a dating project, if you will, especially when you're working with someone new that you don't know. And that should be a funding strategy. Anyone that comes out of the collective knows what that is. Okay, next question. Can a grant writer get paid from the grant? Now, I understand why you're asking that, because you're thinking, I don't have the money, that's why I need to go after a grant. Hello. So can I just win a $100,000 grant and then take off 10 of that and pay the grant writer? No, and I'm sorry to crush your bubble. That is really no longer considered an eligible or ethical use of funds. The funders want their programming funding to go to what you say you're going to do, like from that day moving forward. So you really can't pay your grant writer back way later from grant funding. That said, there are some creative things you can do, like, does your grant writer actually also help with program or project administration and maybe even taking care of some of the grant reporting? Well, at that point, then you can start paying them for their services because they're still helping you execute it. That is a separate conversation, a conversation you can have with your grant writer. But on the whole, you need to be thinking about it like going to get my hair cut, right? Like, I have to pay to have my hair cut, right? Or whatever. So we pay for professional services. And in the world of grant writing, you definitely, what you pay for is what you get. So if you just take any Joe Schmo that says they're a grant writer off Fiverr or Upwork or Freelancer, Upwork could be better quality, but on the whole, right? Freelancer, Fiverr, I mean, buyer beware, seriously. So just be aware that what you pay for, it makes a big difference. And I'm going to give you one example. So I had a client, a nonprofit that was pursuing funding in partnership with the city to access a big federal grant. Typically, the grant required 20% match. I read the small print and understood the intricacies of this program and thought, I think we have an argument to make that this struggling nonprofit cannot afford the 20% match requirement, so let's apply to have it waived so that it would actually be 100% grant. And so we did that. So then not only did I save them $80,000 that they didn't have to come up with for 20% match, like that just covered in and of itself the cost of me as a grant writer, which I think by the time it was all said and done, it was like a $22,000 contract to write the grant for them because we had some revisions. So that just goes to show, like, if you're working with a good grant writer, like, not only did we save them, like, not paying us as a grant writer and the 80 grand that was their 20% match, like, they really just had the upfront cost of paying us, and the rest was grant funded, and that project's underway and it's happening right now, and I'm super excited to see where it goes. It's very fun. That's the best part of doing grant writing. So anyway, just want to emphasize that point with the story. All right, so what should you be looking for then when you want to find a great grant writer? There's a couple of things. One, how is their writing? How do they communicate with you? Is it professional? If there are typos and a poorly put together email, probably going to be typos and a poorly put together narrative. So observe how they interact with you professionally. If you interact with anyone in the collective, typically this is what will happen. You'll have a phone call, sort of a consultation, see if they can help you, etc. And then they will give you a proposal for a funding strategy. A proposal, like that is going to give you an enormous amount of information, like laying out scope of work, laying out assumptions, fee, schedule, right? And then boom, if you're happy, sign on the dotted line, let's get going. If you're dinking around and you don't really have a contract back yet from them, or I don't know, the proposal's put together poorly or whatever, like that's all, you can learn a lot from that. So I certainly like to see a very well put together proposal before I would spend any money on anyone, because it is the ultimate indicator of how they work, in my opinion. Okay, what else should you look for? Your grant writer doesn't technically have to be certified. I mean, I was a self-taught grant writer, but I also learned grant writing before there was any sort of modern options out there, right? So, I didn't want to learn from a very archaic website that looks like they're teaching the same stuff from the 90s. The world of funding is changing. So it is beneficial to find a certified grant writer because they are trained in not only grant writing, but excellence in project management. So anyone that you would get that would be basically listed on our hiring a grant writer page, or if you email us and look for a referral, they will be a certified grant writer. And what does that mean? That means they have completed and watched multiple online instructional videos. They've passed several assessments related to funding research and grant writing, and they have submitted coursework, which has been read and reviewed by a grant writing coach, the bulk of which is me at this point. We've got a little bit of help that's taken that over. And then they get feedback on, is it a pass or it's a fail? If it was a fail and we have really, really high standards, it goes back to them and they can resubmit it and become a certified grant writer. But a lot of times it's like, I think you could have found like a little bit more funding sources in this arena, go back and look at it. Like it's rigorous, okay? So anyway, then they're certified. You can ask them if they're certified. That's a great question to ask. The other thing I would ask is, may I see a writing sample? It can be anything. It doesn't have to be a grant narrative. Frankly, it really doesn't matter. It's just how well do they write? And is it compelling? Is it storytelling based, right? Is it just, obviously it depends on the kind of grant you're pursuing, but right, you want to see that they can write in the format and the medium that you need. A question that I know you're very tempted to ask is, what's your win rate? And I discourage you from asking that, and here's why. It's fine, go ahead and ask it if you want, but the reason I discourage it is that it's not the whole picture. So one of the first grant programs I ever started going after was in the state of Washington. It was these small transportation grants for small rural communities. And the reality is, you applied, you put in a great application, you're not going to get funded in the first year because the backlog is just so big. So it's like, you're probably not going to be funded year 2, but by year 3 you should. It was almost like, you're kind of just working your way up through the line to get funded, so long as it is a project that does score well and is needed, right? And so you could say, wow, you only had a 33% win rate on that because you had to submit it 3 years in a row. Yeah, you could say that, right? But that is what the process was to get funded with this program. And then we did get it funded, and it didn't take a lot of work to reapply every 2 years or the subsequent years, because we did do the bulk of that work in year 1, right? So just keep that in mind, that it's not always the full picture to just say, what's your win rate? And if a grant writer says they have a 100% win rate, I would personally run, because they're not pursuing hard enough grants, right? Or they're lying, because no one has a 100% win rate. This is a game of odds. Not 100% of grants are awarded. That said, we certainly want to improve your odds, which is why we're real sticklers on the 20% rule, which is not pursuing grants that you have a less than 20% chance of getting, right? 20% north, 40 even better, right? Those are the types of numbers we want to be working with, or else your grant writer could be amazing, put in a stellar proposal, but if only 1% of the grants are funded, it doesn't matter, because everybody has a great proposal, right? So those are the things you want to be thinking about. All right, if you have feedback for us, if you think we should tackle this, like actually improving our process so that you could reach more of our certified grant writers, please let me know, because this is something I'm noodling on and really thinking about in terms of where we go from here. So I'd love your feedback on that. And I think that's it. Okay, good luck finding a fantastic grant writing unicorn. If you have any other questions or ideas, add them in the comments below. Hit the like and subscribe to get more videos like this. And with that, I think that's it. See you later.